Paint your faces. Paint your faces and get in the three-ring circus.
Watch that reaction carefully. Not excitement, not urgency, not the energy of people who understand that the most important moment in their league's history is teetering on the edge of collapse. That's the sound of an organization that showed up late to their own deadline meeting. And I don't mean philosophically late. I mean literally, actually, physically late. The WNBPA, the Players Union, was late to a meeting they knew about. A meeting with a hard deadline attached to it. A meeting that was supposed to determine whether the two most electric seasons in WNBA history were going to be followed by a third or followed by a work stoppage. And they couldn't be bothered to show up on time. Let that breathe for a second, because this isn't about being 5 minutes behind on a Tuesday. This is the kind of thing that tells you everything about who's serious and who's not. This is the kind of thing that tells you what people actually value when the cameras aren't rolling and the press releases aren't being drafted. And what we found out on this particular day is that the WNBPA's leadership doesn't value the moment they're in. They don't value the leverage they're sitting on. And most importantly, right now, they don't seem to value the historic wave that a 22-year-old from Indiana built for them. The same wave they are currently surfing without a thank you note. Here's exactly what happened. The meeting was originally scheduled for 4 in the afternoon, a pivotal CBA negotiation meeting, a deadline day meeting, the kind of meeting where you show up early, you bring your A game, and you treat every minute like money because it is. What time did the union actually start trickling in?
The attendees were trickling into the hotel just after 5 p.m. The meeting, originally scheduled for 4 p.m., began roughly sometime in the last 30 minutes.
Just after 5 p.m., 1 hour late, to their own deadline negotiation. And the reporter covering it, to her credit, noted it factually without calling it out by name. But let's call it out. Because this deserves to be said plainly and loudly. If this is landing for you, hit that like button right now. And if you're not subscribed yet, what are you doing? Subscribe. Let's go.
In case you did not understand what that actually read, because Annie didn't call him out, the WNBPA, the Players Union, was late to the mother effing meeting. Paint your faces. Paint your faces and get in the three rings.
That's the frustration you feel when you've watched this thing unfold in real time and you keep asking yourself the same question. Do these people understand what they have? Do they understand that the Caitlin Clark era didn't just bump ratings? It didn't just sell a few extra jerseys. It fundamentally changed the economic trajectory of a league that was losing $10 million a year for most of its existence. The WNBA went from a charity case on ESPN to a genuine ratings contender. Expansion teams are coming. Media deals are being renegotiated. Revenue sharing checks are being cut for the first time in league history. And the Players Union can't be on time to the meeting where they hash out how to get paid. This isn't incompetence. This is something worse. This is indifference. And indifference at this moment is unforgivable. Now let's talk about why this deadline even existed in the first place. Because that context matters. The WNBA had set a target date for an agreement to avoid disrupting the May 8th start of the season. Not a soft suggestion. A hard target with real consequences attached. Miss it, and you're looking at a delayed season. Miss the season, and you're not just losing games, you're losing the momentum that took nearly a decade to build. You're losing casual fans who just discovered the sport. You're losing sponsors who came in because Caitlin Clark had the lead trending nationally every other week. And yet, when that target date arrived, the union showed up an hour late, had a meeting that stretched into the night, and left without a deal. What do the commissioners say after all of that?
We're working towards a win-win deal.
Fair enough. That's a commissioner who sounds like she understands the stakes. That's someone who, whether you agree with her position or not, is speaking with urgency. She said, we've got to get it done soon. Not we're exploring options. Not we're encouraged by the dialogue. Soon. Because she knows that every day this drags on is a day the league loses ground it fought hard to gain. Now here is the WNBPA Executive Director's statement from the same night.
Every meeting is a positive meeting. The fact that we scheduled meetings, that we offer dates to schedule meetings, that we actually get together, get in the room. I think that's positive. It's taking as long as it's taking, but that's what it needs to be.
Because that statement is doing something remarkable. It is taking the absolute bare minimum of professional function, showing up to a scheduled meeting, and presenting it as an achievement. We had a meeting. About the meetings that we scheduled. And that's a win. That's not negotiating. That's not leadership. That's a person who is confused showing up for showing out. And it gets worse when you put it in the actual context of what's on the table. We're not talking about a league offering a 2% raise and a better parking spot. We're talking about an offer that would represent a 280% increase in the salary cap. Year 1, the cap goes from $1.5 million to $5.75 million. Maximum salaries go from $249,000 to $1.3 million. Average salaries jump from $120,000 to $540,000 in the first year alone, and by year 6 of this deal, you're looking at an $8.5 million cap.
I don't understand. You had a deadline. Why wasn't everybody in a room at 7 a.m. in the morning going all day and all night towards potentially getting a deal done?
That is the question. That is the only question that matters right now. Because when you're looking at those salary numbers, those generational, life-changing, wealth-building salary numbers, and your response is to show up an hour late to the meeting where you could secure them, you have to ask, what exactly are we doing here? What is the actual goal? And here's the uncomfortable answer that's starting to emerge from the pattern of behavior we've seen. For some people involved in this negotiation, the goal isn't to get the best deal for WNBA players. The goal is something else. Maybe it's leverage. Maybe it's principle. Maybe it's the belief, earnest but mathematically questionable, that this is a social cause rather than a business negotiation.
I think they understand it, but again, as I've said before, in my opinion, they believe this is a social cause.
And look, there's nothing wrong with believing your labor fight is about more than money. That's a legitimate frame. Women's sports have been systematically undervalued for decades, and the players who built this league through the lean years deserve to see that acknowledged. That's real. That matters. But here's where the frame becomes a problem. When you conflate the social cause with the negotiating strategy, you end up making decisions that feel righteous in the moment, but cost everyone in the long run. Because a work stoppage doesn't advance the social cause, a delayed season doesn't advance the social cause. Losing the casual fans who just discovered this sport because they watched Caitlin Clark drop 40 on someone in a nationally televised game does not advance the social cause. You cannot cash a principal, but you can cash a $1.3 million max contract. And right now, the league is trying to hand those out and the union can't get in the room on time. Let's talk about the revenue sharing piece for a moment, because this is where the real story lives. The league just paid out $8 million in revenue sharing bonuses from last season. $8 million split among roughly 144 players. That's somewhere between $33,000 and $50,000 per player as a bonus on top of their salary. And here's the thing that should be making every single player do math in their head right now. That $8 million payout happened during a season where Caitlin Clark only played part of the year because she was finishing her college career. She wasn't even in the league for the full season, and the revenue sharing pool hit $8 million for the first time ever. So the question every player should be sitting with, the question that is apparently starting to shift attitudes inside the union, is this. What does that number look like in 2026 when Caitlin Clark plays a full season? What does it look like in 2027 when the expansion teams come online and the new media deals kick in? Are we talking 12 million, 15 million, 20 million? Because if the pool gets to $20 million, you're looking at individual bonus checks over $100,000 per player on top of their salary.
These players is astonishing at this point. Again, they're turning down a 4 to 5x salary.
That's the calculation. That's the number that is right now sitting in the group chats and the living rooms and the quiet moments where players stop performing conviction and start doing actual math. And that math is starting to tell a very different story than the one the union's leadership has been selling. Because here's what nobody wants to say out loud. The players who are holding the line on this negotiation are not the players who stand to benefit from the current moment. The players who are driving the revenue that funds this entire conversation are the young stars, and they're the ones being offered accelerated max contracts. The league's offer includes a provision that allows players like Caitlin Clark and Paige Beckers to reach maximum contract status years earlier than the current system allows. We're talking 2027 for Clark, 2028 for Beckers. To qualify, you need to make first or second team All-League while still on your rookie contract. That is a very specific, very targeted provision aimed at the players who are actually moving the needle. The ones whose highlights are getting 40 million views on social media. The ones whose jerseys are selling out before they hit the shelves. The ones whose names are appearing in conversations about the most impactful athletes in American sports right now. And if you're a veteran player who's been grinding in this league for 8 years, playing through the seasons when the WNBA was losing money and nobody was covering it nationally, this offer doesn't fast-track anything for you. You get the same cap increases as everyone else. No accelerated path. No special provision. The league looked at who built the financial foundation and decided to reward whoever is currently building the cultural superstructure. Whether that's fair is a separate conversation, but it's ruthlessly logical.
Paint your faces. Paint your faces and get in the three-ring circus. I mean, really, the unprofessional nature of these players is astonishing at this point. Again, they're turning around.
That's a hard thing to hear, but it's not wrong. And here's where it gets really interesting from a structural standpoint. The league has essentially crafted an offer that makes the union negotiate against itself. Because the players who stand to benefit most from this specific proposal structure, the young stars with the accelerated max contracts on the table, those players have the most to lose from a work stoppage. They have the most to lose from extended negotiations. They have the most to lose from a delayed season. Caitlin Clark sitting out games to honor a picket line is not in Caitlin Clark's financial interest. And the league knows that. The league took the biggest internal tension inside the union and turned it into a negotiating tool. That's not just shrewd. That's a chess move, 3 moves ahead of where most people are looking. But here's where I keep coming back to the fundamental absurdity of the situation. The players' union is fighting this fight, whatever the fight actually is at this point, because the stated positions keep shifting while holding what should be the strongest hand in the history of this negotiation. They have Caitlin Clark, they have Paige Beckers, they have Aliyah Boston, they have a league that just hit revenue milestones nobody thought were possible 2 years ago. They have an audience that is growing younger and more engaged. They have sponsors throwing money at this sport who wouldn't have returned a phone call 18 months ago. All of that leverage. All of those cards. And the move is to show up an hour late to the deadline meeting and then give a press statement, bragging about having attended the meeting. I mean, listen to this again. Having meetings is not a win. Getting in the same room is not a victory lap. That is the definition of the floor. That is the absolute minimum that should be happening by default. And I mean that word deliberately by default. You don't get credit for attending negotiations you are obligated to attend. You get credit for the outcome. And right now, there is no outcome. Now, I want to be careful here, because strong language about individuals isn't always the most useful tool. But what that sentiment is pointing at is real. The energy being projected by the union's leadership does not match the energy of the moment. This is a once-in-a-generation opportunity. The WNBA is at an inflection point that may not come again for another decade. The combination of Caitlin Clark's cultural reach, the expansion wave, the new media landscape, the social media infrastructure that amplifies women's sports in ways that weren't possible 5 years ago, all of that is aligned right now. All of that is pointing in the same direction. And the response from union leadership is, it's taking as long as it's taking. No, it is not taking as long as it needs to take. It is taking as long as the people in charge of negotiating are willing to let it take. And right now, those people are letting it take too long, showing up too late, and giving too little urgency to a situation that demands everything they have. Because here's the thing about momentum. It doesn't wait. It doesn't pause for a press statement. It doesn't sit in a hotel lobby for an hour while you figure out when to show up. Momentum moves, and if you're not moving with it, you're falling behind it. The WNBA has Caitlin Clark. That is not a permanent condition. Careers end. Attention cycles. The window that is open in the last 2 years is real, and it is open right now. The question is whether the people responsible for securing the player's future are going to walk through it or stand outside arguing about the terms of the doorframe. Because right now, from everything we're seeing, it feels like the latter. And Caitlin Clark deserves better than that. Not because she needs protecting. Not because she's asking for anyone to fight on her behalf. But because she has single-handedly dragged this league into a conversation it wasn't having 2 years ago. And the people who are supposed to be leveraging that moment are showing up to deadline meetings an hour late and congratulating themselves for getting there at all. The deal is going to get done. The math is too good for it not to. The revenue-sharing checks have already started shifting attitudes inside the union. And once players started running projections on what those checks look like in a full Caitlin Clark season, the hardline positions started softening. Kelsey Plum, the vice president of the union, has already shifted her language from demanding 50% of gross revenue to calling 70% of net a significant win, and saying she's always been someone who focuses on the game and not the gap. That's not the language of a union preparing to strike. That's the language of a union preparing to sign. But the damage being done in the meantime is real. Every day this drags out is a day the narrative around women's basketball gets complicated by labor friction instead of amplified by playoff basketball. Every press conference where the union's executive director brags about having a meeting is another moment where the public's growing goodwill toward the WNBA gets tested, and the fans who came in because of Caitlin Clark, who are newer fans, who are less invested in the labor dynamics, who came for the basketball, those fans notice. They notice when the thing they came to love feels like it might not be there. So when the CBA gets signed, and it will, watch the language. Watch who claims the win. And watch what happens to the veterans who got left behind in this structure when the next CBA cycle starts 6 years from now. Because those fractures don't heal clean. The question isn't whether the deal gets done. The question is what the people in charge of doing it are willing to cost everyone else in the process of getting there. And right now, the answer appears to be more than they realize. Show up on time, do the work, get the deal done. Caitlin Clark is not going to be 22 years old forever. This window is open right now. Walk through it. Drop your take in the comments. Do you think this deal gets done before the season is delayed? And do you think the Players Union's leadership understands the moment they're operating in? Or are they playing a different game entirely? Because from where I'm sitting, those two things are not the same game. And the difference between them is going to matter for the next decade of women's basketball.